Hello, and welcome to Transmission X. I'm your host, Nate Allen. The date, February 2nd, 2024. This is the 7th transmission. A transmission is the sending of a signal from one person or place to another. It is my hope that this signal provide you a beacon so that you may find what it is that was meant to find you. If you have found this frequency, it is not an error. So stay tuned, but most importantly, be ready. We have been on a journey all exposing how the fallen have influenced man. Last week's transmission focused on the mystery teaching of enchantment and a modern-day manifestation of it in the form of hypnosis and that of channeling. We ended mentioning the connection between Dr. Puharich from Project Penguin and MK Ultra's Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the head chemist behind the CIA's MK Ultra program. I hope each of you is looking into all of this as we go. It is about to get really interesting. So, we have through previous episodes connected the fallen angels' teachings, the mysteries, being passed down through time from the Brotherhood of the Snake, to the Scarlet Council, to the priest classes, to the leaders of civilizations, fast forward to modern-day Jesuits, which also seem to coincidentally don scarlet and purple robes, and also I have mentioned connections to secret societies and orders, such as the Freemasons. I've mentioned these briefly, and have promised further explanations in upcoming transmissions because I had to lay the groundwork for the story. I've had to show you the connections in a few very meaningful ways so that you will be able to see them as we get further into this web of deceit. Remember, we know the enemy through symbols such as the serpent and colors such as scarlet, but we more so know the adversary by the fruits of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that tree that brought physical death in the very beginning and continues to bring death and chaos to divine order this very day. From that spiritual sin or the defying of God's command, the path toward the physical away from God to the passing down of the mystery teachings of the falling man continues to reach for the fruit of the great tempters such as pride, greed, lust, wrath, envy, gluttony, sloth, the 7 deadly sins. The 7-headed serpent also, going back to ancient Sumeria, it's all in our history if we just know what we're looking for. There is nothing new under the sun. It is a story on repeat, and the adversary seems to know the moves before they're played. So, when we can get a gem, a nugget, a breadcrumb on the trail to the truth, we take that opportunity and snatch it up and expose it. It isn't often that in his story we get to see one man or character that seems to be so powerful, yet so egotistical, that his moves are in the open, in the light of day, right in front of us. And not only do we get to see the bad fruit fall from his tree, but we get complete access to the secrets of his character. Today, we have that opportunity. That man and what his actions led to are infamous. The reason you heard Bill Clinton in the last transmission apologize to a nation. You may think that man would be someone like a Hitler or a Stalin or Mao, but no. The man that will begin today's story goes by the name of Allen Dulles. If that name rings a bell, you may have switched flights or had a layover at the airport named after him, which is Dulles International Airport out of Washington, D.C. He is the reason for Project Artichoke, Project MK Ultra. He is the reason we have a governmental agency in that of the CIA running amok today. Project Artichoke was a project in which the government scientists and CIA agents used hypnosis and drugs on unknowing and oftentimes unwilling participants while researching methods of interrogation techniques. The primary goal of Project Artichoke was to determine whether a person could be involuntarily made to perform an act of attempted assassination. The mainstream story goes, we were only trying to keep the Soviets in check. We were only trying to keep up with the Soviets. Now, listener, this is a deception. Now we have Dulles, seemingly a military man, a regular man, out in the open, just doing what he must for his country. But that is not the case. This man makes this entire story a web of lies. He makes the entire story so confounded and so interwoven that scientists and the military don't know whether they are helping a patient or torturing them. You see, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the Cold War was in play, and fear was the real drug. Fear was the main motivator. You see, Dulles, like evil, like the evil one, may not have been at every atrocity that took place, but he put the pieces in place. He set the stage for certain things to happen. Let's give a little background on Allen Dulles and the things that he oversaw. He co-founded, and I'll say this in English, Arab Commercial Bank in Lausanne, Switzerland. That represented a pact between the CIA and the Muslim Brotherhood, which was comprised of Saudi royalty. In 1953, he was the first director of the CIA, civilian director that is. He was in charge of the 1954 Guatemalan coup d'etat. For those of you who don't know what a coup d'etat is, it's where you take over an active government. He was a part of Operation Ajax, an Iranian coup. He helped provide safe haven for 100,000 Nazis and hired German scientists and other criminals to be active CIA agents under Project Paperclip. He also oversaw the Lockheed U-2 program, which served to heighten tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. He oversaw the Bay of Pigs fiasco in Cuba, and recently there has been major accusations and speculations regarding his involvement in the assassination of JFK. Like the old saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. If hundreds of years prior to Allen Dulles, we had the Jesuit priest who set things in motion, don't think Allen didn't have his connections as well. There were many. If anyone was royalty without being known in the United States, it was Allen Dulles. But I just want to list 10 here because it is absolutely staggering. He was a member of the Rhodes Round Table. He was a Fabian Socialist, a 33rd degree Freemason, a member of the Knights Templar, a Vatican Knight of Malta, chairman of the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, board chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Remember, they always say the opposite of what they do. Director of the J. Henry Schroeder Bank in London, director at Kuhn and Loeb, an attorney and director of Sullivan and Cromwell, and worked in secret alongside British intelligence. Dulles, one could say, stirred many pots, and some of which are still boiling today. These councils and orders and foundations and the like all show us their true colors. Where you have these secret societies, these brotherhoods, these orders, these councils, these groupings of highly powerful individuals, you have to remember, absolute power corrupts absolutely. There is no exception. The CIA's original purpose was simply to create a clearinghouse for foreign policy intelligence and analysis. But as you can see, Allen Dulles was a busy man, and Harry Truman, the 33rd president of these United States, a man who helped create the CIA by signing into law the dastardly National Security Act of 1947, had this to say after the assassination of JFK in Dallas, and I quote, "For some time, I have been disturbed by the way the CIA has been diverted from its original assignment. It has become an operational and at times a policy-making arm of the government. This has led to trouble and may have compounded our difficulties in several explosive areas." Boy, was the old president right. Allen Dulles and the rulers of America, behind the closed doors of all those secret clubs, were not only taking over governments abroad, but they were doing it right here on American soil. And then they started creating programs where men and women would lose their minds, their lives, and some say their souls. Here's an MK Ultra mind control victim and her official testimony. Give it a listen.
I'm Chris DiNicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. I felt drugged because he had given me a shot before he started the procedure. When it was over, he gave me another shot. The next thing I remember, I was with my grandparents again in Tucson, Arizona. I was 4 years old. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that looked like real children. I stabbed a doll with a spear once after being severely traumatized, but the next time I refused. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office. Between 1972 and 1976, he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, subproject, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation and mind control experiments, which I have submitted in your written documentation. I was caught twice, and Dr. Green ruthlessly used electric shock, drugs, spun me on a table, put shots in my stomach, in my back, dislocated my joints, and hypnotic techniques to make me feel crazy and suicidal. Because of my rebellion and growing lack of cooperation, they gave up on me as a spy assassin.
And her testimony goes on for some time, but you get the picture. She was just a child. If you look up CIA MK Ultra, the official narrative is that scientists in universities and in the military were testing homeless people, military vets, criminals, deviants, all adults. But as in her case, that obviously wasn't true. If she was telling the truth, it has been my experience that people can exaggerate and can lie. But for someone to get in front of a room and give a testimony about something so severe that would have no benefit on their life if nothing was done about it, and nothing was done about it, leads me to make that a more credible victim, a more credible experiencer. That is just my take, and in the next transmission, you'll be hearing from more victims, more experiencers. Dr. Green, Dr. Cameron in Canada, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, all following CIA orders. Please look up those names, as they all have cases and all have people speaking out against them. All were using drugs, hypnosis, the power of suggestion, technology, even torture to gain control of the subjects' minds. Project Artichoke was trying to create assassins. Project MKUltra was trying to separate the ego, the main personality, and break it completely down and create separate personalities, ones they could control. Remember the people going into a trance. Remember the 9 always being brought up by Puharich. It is connected, as you will hear in the next transmission. Some of the victims claim voices that are not human, and some claim demonic possession. An entire podcast could be made going down this specific rabbit hole. The CIA in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and the programs and projects that were being created and that were underway. There were many more doctors and many more victims, and one thing we do know for sure, there were many more records kept. CIA General Counsel at the time, Larry Houston, said that this was culpable negligence, is all. And CIA Director, a lifelong Navy man by the name of Vice Admiral William F. Rayborn Jr. He was the CIA Director directly after Allen Dulles. Well, he lasted a total of 14 months, because I'm sure you noticed in the previous victim statement, the dates. Dulles wasn't CIA Director the entire time. Like I said earlier, he was the one who set the stage. William F. Rayborn Jr., as I stated, lasted a total of 14 months before getting far away from Dulles' mess. But the next CIA Director up to bat, his name was Richard Helms. He fit right in and instructed scientist Sidney Gottlieb to destroy all the records. So what we have today, released and declassified, ladies and gentlemen, are the scraps of what probably really took place. We have the whitewashed version of a much more horrific story. From one suggestion from a Jesuit 200 plus years ago, we go from the wealthy playing alchemy by using enchantment to scientists honing hypnotism, blending it with channeling, using technology, sprinkling a little mind-altering drugs on top. Well, let's just call it a spell being cast, and then voila. Now the voices begin, and crazy talk about multiple personalities and suicidal thoughts start to take over the victims' minds. The news would love for you to think that this was just a little bit of secret dosing of LSD, mixed with powerful suggestion techniques to some military criminals and societal derelicts. But again, like I said, that's not what occurred. It's like saying Colonel Mustard in the study with the knife, when in reality, Colonel Mustard just turned out to be a scientist in a laboratory, and the only thing killed, at least we hope, was the identity of the victim. Just press delete. Lives were changed forever. To find the truth, we will have to listen to more victims and enter the world of targeted individuals. The apology by Clinton was never enough. The entire truth may have been destroyed in those records Sidney Gottlieb destroyed, but the victims will always have a voice here on Transmission X. I'm not saying that every one of the people that come forward are factual. I'm not saying that I believe everything that I hear. But remember, the truth is written on all of our hearts. We understand pain, and we can understand a victim when we hear one. So stay tuned for the next chapter in this CIA mind control saga. But most importantly, be ready. If any one of you is or was a targeted victim or a targeted individual, and you would like to send me a message, or if anyone just needs to reach out to the show, you can always contact me at transmissionx@mail.com. That's transmissionx@mail.com. Until next time.